Welcome to the talk entitled Awaken the QGIS Within. My name is Gretchen Peterson, and I'm a cartographer and analyst, and I'm also an author. And one of my most recent books was QGIS Map Design, which I co-authored with the inimitable Anita Grazer. If you want to tweet about this talk, I recommend QGIS Awakening for the hashtag. So in the next 30 minutes, I'm going to take you through an introductory demo of QGIS. And along the way, we're going to take some quotes from Tony Robbins' Awaken the Giant Within, and maybe poke a little bit of fun. But it is a great book, and it sold like it's a bestseller. So, you know, it's a great book. I'm not trying to make too much fun of it. So to get started, one of his quotes is, "Stop being afraid of what could go wrong and start being excited of what could go right." So with that in mind, just sit back and relax. And if you're brand new to QGIS, just kind of try to figure out if this looks like the kind of software that might help you out in your job. Don't try to memorize every detail, since I'm going to be going through it pretty quickly. So to start off with, we're going to go to a blank QGIS project. And we're going to do two things to start with. And this is what I almost always do every time I start a new project, which is to change the CRS, which is the Coordinate Reference System or projection. And we're going to be making a coffee map in the Raleigh area. So I'm just going to look for an appropriate projection for North Carolina, and it'll pop up as I use the filter box. And then I'm going to select it and click Apply. So now we're using an appropriate projection for our map. Under the General tab, I want to change the color, the background color of the entire map. And so for that, I'm just going to use a hex code that I've already picked out, and that's right here, because I want to use like a dark blue color for the background. And so you notice I use a hex code, but there's a lot of other ways to choose colors in QGIS, and we'll explore those a little bit as we go. So my background color is changed, and the projection is changed. Next thing to do is add a couple of data sets. It's not a very data-intensive map, but we will add a few things. And I think we're out of them, but I did have some map handouts in the back. I'm not sure I saw any when I was just back there, but if you were fortunate enough to get one, you can see what the finished map will look like. Here I just have my Windows Explorer open, and I'm just going to drag in the shapefile that I want to use. And this is from the MapZen OpenStreetMap Metro Extracts website, which is a fantastic resource for those of you who don't know how to use the OpenStreetMap data. Go to the MapZen Metro Extracts and just type in a location name for a city that you're interested in, and you can download your data from there. And so this is just the lines. They have points and polygons as well. So these are the lines for Raleigh. Most of them are roads, but not all of them are roads. And then we're also going to add in a shapefile that I hand curated. It's coffee shops. And there is a coffee shop tag in the OpenStreetMap database that you can use, but it didn't have all of the coffee shops that I wanted to use. In OpenStreetMap parlance, it's called a tag. And so anything that you're naming in OpenStreetMap is a tag. And so you'll hear that over and over again as you work with OpenStreetMap data, are these tags. So the next thing to do really is to focus in on our area. Down here is a spatial bookmarks panel, and those familiar with other GISs will know what a bookmark is. It's just an extent that I've previously defined. So I can go to my Coffee Zoom 1 bookmark and just zoom to the area that I want to show here. And so that's the spatial bookmarks. So the very first thing I want to do is style these lines, right? So to style anything, you just double-click your layer in the Layers panel. And it's going to bring up the Layer Properties window here. And then I'm going to go to Style. And okay, so this is interesting. In a typical GIS world, you might have more than one layer of the same exact data set for different styles. So if I want to have some thick roads, I would have a layer in the layer list, and thin roads would have a separate layer in the layer list. But that renders rather slowly in QGIS. We would prefer to just have one layer of that data in the layers list, and then use this rule-based renderer instead. So that's what we're going to use here. We're going to use a rule-based renderer. And you can see that there's one empty rule already showing. So we double-click the empty rule, and it comes up with this whole other thing. And we're going to call this rule primary roads. So these are going to be our thick roads. And we're going to use a filter of highway equals primary. Let me make sure I spell it right. Or highway equals trunk. And so you just become familiar with the data and how to filter it. You can even test it here to make sure that your query is working right. And it will tell you how many rows are returned if it is working right. If you don't know how to query your data, that's pretty common, right? When you're exploring data, you can use the expression string builder to figure that out. And you can open it up and see what fields and values are in your data to work with, and also what are the different conditionals and things like that that you can use. But I already know that this works, and I'm going to go ahead and use a hex color for what I want these roads to be. And that's going to be A6. 97, A6. But you can see there's a lot of other ways to choose colors. There's HSV, RGB. You can use these different tabs here to choose other colors as well. So here's kind of a purplish gray color, and I'm going to make these thick lines and click OK. So that's my first rule, and if I click Apply and take a look, you can see I've got some thick lines and some coffee shop dots. But now my next rule, I'm going to right-click Copy, right-click Paste. And now I've got two rules, right? So I'm going to double-click the one on the bottom, and I'm going to call this one All Other Roads. And this one is going to be Highway is not null. And then we're going to make these the thin roads that go in the background. So now I've got two rules, and I can click Apply and check out how it looks. But I've only got one layer in the layer list, see? So renders faster, and I still have my two rules. You can have as many rules as you want. You can nest them. You can drag them up and down, because that's going to be the draw order. So that's what rule-based rendering is about. So now we're going to switch over to labels. So for labels, I wanted to go back to my slides there. Okay, so Tony Robbins, he has this chapter called Dreams of Destiny. And he says, most people have no idea of the giant capacity we can immediately command when we focus all of our resources on mastering a single area of our lives. And so I found this Fabio cow here, and I thought she worked well with the Dreams of Destiny title. And I think that she is really focused on labels. So that's what we're going to focus on here. All right, so with labels, you just go, we're still in the layer properties for this layer, right? So we switch over to the labels section, and we go to labels, and we want to show labels for this layer. And then we want to use the name field. OpenStreetMap always has a name field that you use for labeling. And that's just going to give it default labeling if I press OK at this point. Instead, I want to change all this stuff, right? I want to use Museo Sans for my text font. Museo Sans is a really great labeling font, and it's free. And I'm going to use those defaults, and I'm going to use, this time, I often like to have my labels match the roads. And so I'm going to use this pick color tool here, and I'm going to grab that color that I used off the roads, because maybe I don't remember what the hex was for it. And then I'm going to go in to choose color, and I want it to be a little bit lighter than the roads so it really shows up. And that's how I'm going to do that. So I'm going to click Apply and check out how my road labels look. They're a little bit hard to see, right? So make sure that we put in a buffer. So here we've got buffers, and I'm going to make them a 0.5 size. And you'll see this time and again in this talk, which is that we're going to use the background color as my buffer color, right? They're not glowy halos. They're just not going, they're going to break up the lines that are behind them. So I've clicked Apply, and those are a little bit more visible now. And the last thing I had noticed was that, let's see, if I can make this go away. The lines aren't really following the roads, and there are some curvy roads in this location. And so but they're jutting out and they're not really following the lines. So let's change the placement to curved and click OK. And I think we'll find that it looks pretty good that way. So now we've got our labels for the roads. And so it's time to style the coffee shops. So very first thing, we'll double click it and open up the layer properties for that data set. And then we're going to change the style of those to a simple white circle, make them kind of big, take a look. And I think we should do something stylistically interesting here. So click on the draw effects, and we'll give them a drop shadow. The drop shadow that it defaults to is kind of blurry, and I didn't really like that, so I'm going to actually change the blur radius to 1. And then we have a straight-up drop shadow on our circles. So in the draw effects, we will revisit that in a few moments, is where you can do some of these cool-looking things. So next up is to label those. And we're going to, again, show labels for this layer. And again, we've got name for our labels. This time, though, instead of Museo Sans, I'm going to use Calibri. And so why am I doing that, and why am I using 2 different fonts? And in fact, you'll find that I'm going to use 4 fonts in this map. And cartographers often say, use only 2 fonts in a map. And it's a good rule, but it's a rule that I break all the time. And I'm going to break that rule in this map, too. In fact, Tony Robbins says, design your rules so that you're in control, so that the outside world is not what determines whether you feel good or bad. And so I'm breaking the rules on fonts in this map because that's what I want to do. All right. So I'm using Calibri. And the real reason for that is because I love Museo Sans for roads, but I have not purchased the Museo Bold font, which is Museo Sans is free, Museo Bold you have to pay for. So I'm going a little cheap here, and I'm using Calibri, which is a free sans serif that's compatible with Museo Sans. All right, so this one I'm going to, of course, like I said, I'm going to use the bold, and these have to be large labels. And our labels are going to be white so that they're visible, and then I'm going to click apply, and I'm going to see what coffee shops are around here. All right, so we got 5 coffee shops labeled, but the labels need a little bit more help. So as always, we're going to draw a text buffer, and we're going to use that background color for the text buffer. And we're going to click apply. And then you'll see that they kind of cover up the dots a little bit. And so for that, we need to change the placement to a round point, and I think a distance of 2 will probably work, but I'm going to apply and just check it out first. Yeah, that's mostly good. And then also, now I see all the labels are showing up, but in case all the labels aren't showing up, I'm going to click on Show All Labels for this layer, including colliding labels, just so I can make sure that they always show up during this demo. All right, I think we've got those perfect at this point. So the next thing to do is add our own file. We need a You Are Here point for this map, right? We want to know where our convention center is. So to do that, there's lots of different ways, but I'm going to simply add a new shapefile. I'm going to give it the coordinate reference system of this map, and it's going to be at 1 point. And then in the new shapefile, it's not going to have any fields except an ID field by default. So I just want to create a new field where I'm going to put the label. I'm going to put the name of whatever point I'm making. This Add to Fields List button gets me every time. I always type something in here, and then I forget to Add to Fields List. And then I have an empty shapefile and have to go back and do it again. So remember to press that button, and then it's going to prompt you to save as something. And so we're going to call it You Are Here Too. And then so you can just see by opening up the attribute table that there's nothing in there right now, right? So we're going to add 1 point. So we're going to toggle editing, and then we're going to use the Add Point tool. And I know that this is where the convention center is here. And so I've just clicked right where it goes and giving it an ID of 1, and I'm going to type in You Are Here for the name. And then I'm going to stop editing. Looking at the attribute table, you can see that I've just put in that data point. And I'm going to double click it and give it a little bit of styling in the layer properties. All right. So for the style for this, you are here is usually a star. So I'm going to make this a big old white star like this. Click apply, check it out. All right, now at this point, because this is kind of a snazzy map that we're making, I want to make the star look really interesting. So again, I want to go into those draw effects, but this reminds me that I have another slide to show you from Tony Robbins. He talks a lot about unleashing your power, and the way he has you do that is to walk on hot coals. So I thought you might be thankful that I'm not going to make you do that today. Instead, to unleash our power, we're going to use the draw effects in QGIS. All right, so here's the draw effects. This is what I think of unleashing our power. We're going to click on all of them, all the draw effects. And I'm going to make the inner shadow a little bit lighter just because I know it shows up too dark if I do that. And then we'll check out our star. All right, so now it's this sort of this great big old fuzzy looking star. So that's the power for me. So we need to label it though. So we're going to, again, show labels for this layer, and we're going to use that name field where I typed in "you are here." And again, I'm going to use Calibri because I don't have a bold for the other. But I'm going to use bold italic since this is our main "you are here" label. And we're going to make it white. Of course, we have to have a buffer for it. Everything does, and it's going to be this dark blue buffer. But if I take a look at it now, all right, so that's all right, but it's not perfect. So I want to show you this formatting thing here. So formatting, you can wrap on a character. So if you just wanted to wrap on that space character, so you have a separate line for every word, you just press the space bar inside the wrap on character box. And then I want to align that center. Click apply and check out how this looks now. All right, so now that's wrapped on the character, but it's still some problems. I want it to be underneath the star. So we're actually going to offset from the point underneath the star, and I happen to know that 150 map units is kind of perfect for this. And I'll click apply. All right, so there, it's below the star, but it's still in lowercase, right? Because I had a lowercase when I typed it in, so you could just change the typecase right here to uppercase. And I think that we're going to be done at this point with that labeling. All right, so I'm satisfied with that. Actually, I'm not really satisfied. I actually think on this screen, we might want to use 200. This is cartography. All right, so fine. I'll call that good enough. Cool. So we've got the map set up now, and now we want to change over to the print composer. So in QGIS, you use a print composer when you're laying out your map. So I'm going to open that up using the project window, and I'm just going to give it a default name. And here's your empty page. I need to add that map. I need to add text. I need to add all the elements to make this print map that I want to make. First thing I need to do is change the composition to a letter size. And that's because this is a sort of a European-centered project, and so they don't use letter as their default size. So I always change that. I think you can change that in the settings for QGIS so that it always opens up that way. But when you first download it, that's the way it's going to be. So I have a blank letter size page, and I'm going to add our map to the page using the Add Map tool. So all the tools for adding things are over here on the side, and basically you just select one, and then you click and drag onto the page, and you've got whatever it is you're looking at. Now I see that it's not centered exactly right because my title for Oak City Coffee Roasters is a little bit cut off. So if you need to do some adjusting over here, you can come back to the map and adjust, but then once you get back over to your print composer, you need to go to the item properties for the map, and you need to set to the map canvas extent. Otherwise, it's not going to update for you automatically. And so that's exactly where I want it to be. As I'm noting, the item properties is actually where anything that you have selected on the page will have its own item properties that you can then change things for. And I really like that from a graphic design perspective. It makes things easy to work with. So here's a little trick. I want to have some stuff down here at the bottom, right? Like, I was thinking that it would be a lot nicer for the users if they could see a picture of each of these coffee shops, and then they can maybe make a better decision about where they want to go. So I'm just going to cover up the map with a white rectangle, right? So there's a little trick. But I see that I need to change this white rectangle. If I click this off, you can see it has this little border, and so instead of hiding the map, it's sort of highlighting itself, and I want to take that border off. I could do that, and I was doing this for a long time by just changing to a transparent border. Works just fine. But then somebody told me that I should use a border style no pen instead, because that will render a lot quicker, especially if you're using, like, I don't know, if you end up with 50 different rectangles on your print composer for some reason, it'll render faster if you use no pen. All right, so now I'm going to add in, now I did pre-can this a little bit, I'm going to add in an image and click on the image source here. And then this is an image that I already put together of all the coffee shop frontages, I guess you could say. So I've added that in using the Add Image tool, right? And so I was thinking that here would be a good spot for a quick overview map. And so I could take the Add to Map and drag that here, but it's just going to give me the exact same map I already have on the page. So I go back. Actually, before I go back, what I want to do is lock the layers for this map so that I can ensure that this map won't change. So I go up to the item properties and I use the lock layers, and for the just to be safe, I'm going to use lock layer styles for map item as well. Now I can go back here and change things around. So I already have a bookmark for a zoomed out view of this location. But I'm not going to have all that stuff in there because as zoomed out, this doesn't look very good, right? So I'm going to take off the coffee shops for the zoomed out view. And I also need to double click on the star and make it a little bit smaller. All right, so we're going to make that 8. And I am going to take off all the special effects because the fuzziness doesn't look good at the scale. So that's another cartography thing that is always coming up. And labels, I think, should be a lot smaller on here as well. So we'll have this little tiny UR here. And then we should turn off these thin roads, and we should make the primary roads less thick for this small locator map that we're making. And I think that's good for a general overview. So now we can go back to our print composer. And this time when I use the same exact tool I used before, the Add Map tool, I drag it, and now I've got my overview map in there. If this wasn't really correctly, now if I would make this bigger and I want to make sure everything is snapped, you can see that QGIS automatically will turn on these red lines for you to snap everything in place to where it needs to go. And I really appreciate that as a designer. And then once you've changed your extent and things like that, you need to set to map canvas extent to make sure that that is indeed where you want everything. All right, so now we have our overview map. The next thing I wanted to do was make a title for the map, right? So I'm going to click and drag this text, and I can make a text box anywhere I want. And I want to call it not FOSS for GNA, but Coffee for GNA. And so this brings me to another slide from Tony Robbins, which is realize now the power that your words command if you simply choose them wisely. So this is what I'm always, well, they didn't on the cake, but I'm always talking about how titles, especially, you could give them a little bit of thought, right? So I could have just called it Coffee at the FOSS for GNA conference. That would be boring. And not only that, but I'd like to have a little bit of an inside joke. There's actually an inside to an inside joke as well, because my initials used to be GNA, so it's sort of like a coffee map for me. All right, so I've got that written on there, and I'm going to use a third font, Yanan Coffee Sauce, which is also one of my favorite fonts. And Coffee Sauce actually means coffee, and it's free, a free font. So that's how I'm going to make that. And I want this to be the same color as my background, but oh my gosh, it doesn't show up. So now what am I going to do? So I figure I'll use that same cartography trick, and I will add a rectangle at the top so that I have some you know, so that that title can really pop out. But instead of just using the white rectangle, I'm going to do something a little bit fancier, and I'm going to use a gradient fill on this. And so I could just take this and make it a white to transparent gradient fill, and that makes it kind of look nice, right? The white gradually fades into the background. Or I could be even fancier, and because my title is not stretching all the way from left to right, instead it's kind of filling up the upper left-hand space, I'm actually going to tweak this reference point a little bit here and here. So I'm going to use a 0.4 and a 0.1, and that's going to make my light effect go from left to right a little bit more. But you still can't see my title, and that's because my title's actually underneath that, right? And it's covering it up. And so this is where the items list comes super handy when you're designing a map. So you'll forget things, right? You have all these elements on the page and you don't know where they are, and you can't select them easily, but you can use the items list for that. And so you can see my title is right here. And so I can actually click and drag it above, or I can click and drag the rectangle below the Coffee for GNA title. And there it shows up. Just because I like to make this even fancier, I'm going to add in another image next to the title, which is this little coffee cup here. And as I click and drag the title and stuff, it's going to help me snap it so that it works perfectly. I love that about it. There's two more things that we need to do. The first one is going to be titling these. Now, I thought about using leader lines to show which picture goes with which coffee shop. But then I thought, you know, we don't always have to depict everything graphically, right? We can use words, and that looks a lot better on this map. I'm going to use my fourth font here, which is Gabriola, because I like it. And it's going to be blue, and that's one way I maintained cohesion throughout, was that I used a lot of the same blue color for the fonts and white for the labeling. Now that I have that as Gabriola 10, I'm actually just going to copy and paste, right? So these are the typical Windows copy-paste tools that you can use, and I'm going to drag those where they go. And so for each one of these, you can see I've also designed it so that each picture goes in clockwise formation around the map. So everything's really been thought of, and your users will really appreciate you for that when they're taking a look at your maps, that they're not just in there willy-nilly. So now I have these labels, but they're kind of where I want them, but they're not exactly where I want them. So I'm just going to select them all, and you can see that we've got just like most graphics programs, we have an alignment toolbox right here. And so I'm going to align them all so that they're on the same line, and then I can do a few more tweaks to make sure that they are centered within their picture, which you could have done if I had had separate pictures for each of these using the alignment tools. All right, so the last thing that I think that we need for this map is a scale bar, right? Because this is really meant for us to know which coffee shops we can walk to from the conference. And so a scale bar is going to be really handy here. So I'm going to use the Add Scale Bar under the Layout menu, and then I'm just going to drag it where I want it, and then move it later. So you can see that my item properties change for whatever I need to use for the scale bar, right? So it's hooked up to map 1 right now, but I don't remember what map 1 is. So I go up to the items list, and I'm looking through, and I say, okay, which one is map 1? Oh, that's the locator map. I don't want a scale bar for the locator map. I want a scale bar for map 0, which is my big one. So I'm going to go ahead and select that scale bar again and make sure that it's keyed to the map 0, right? And so I'm going to use feet, and I want to just have this be really simple. So I'm going to have no ticks to the left and only one tick to the right, and it's going to be 500 feet long. Right now it's pretty much done, except that you can't see it. So I'm going to change everything to white. And I always think people leave the defaults on here by accident. I'm going to use, I could use Museo Sans for this. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to so that it matches. And then I drag this over to the right, and I've got a nice looking scale bar. If you can't see that, I will zoom in. There, and so now you can see that scale bar that I've got. So basically, that wraps up. Let me see if I can get back over to my slides. All right, so thank you for listening today, and I'll take a couple of questions, but if I don't get to hear yours, please get in touch with me at Gretchen@petersongis.com. Thank you very much. Yes?
I see that you had to kind of change the original map to make a locator map. Is there a way to maintain multiple documents simultaneously?
To have multiple views, multiple map views like you would in Arctis?
Yes.
I am not the expert on QGIS, but I don't believe so.
Okay.
Yes? The question is, do I have any trouble exporting to different formats? This one exports to PDF just fine, and I've never had a problem with PDF. As far as other formats, I can't speak to that, sorry. Yes?
Yeah, thanks for the tips on what things render faster. There's often more than one way to do things. How did you determine that? Is it just from observation, or?
The question is, how did I determine whether things render faster? I believe that tip came from one of the contributors of QGIS had told me that. Yes?
What's the one trick you didn't show us that you really like?
What is the one trick I didn't show you that I really like? Shape burst fills, which I presented last year, so I didn't present again this year. You can use a shape burst fill. Oh, I'm going to cheat, and I'm going to tell you another one too, which is the, now let me go back and see what it's called. So if you're in the layer properties, there's an inverted polygon choice, and you don't get this choice in other GIS programs. So if you want to focus your area on a certain location, you can use an inverted polygon for that and style it with like some kind of transparent white color, and that's going to make everything outside of your area look a little bit faded, right? And so in other GIS software programs, you have to kind of fake that by creating a donut polygon and using that. Here you can do that dynamically. One more question?
For choosing fonts, how did you know, like, oh, I like this font versus that font? Like, so what are the stylistic guides for fonts when you're trying to put them on the map?
The question is, what are the style guides for fonts when you're trying to put them on the map? It's whatever I like at the time. And I don't think that there is a lot of documentation on what maps look good. Some rules are use a sans serif for labels. Use serif for larger text blocks and certain labels like natural features and things. When you get in further from when you're trying to pick out which sans serif to use, you can look at whether you want modern, whether you want more traditional, and things like that. But other than that, it's more just my own personal preference. All right, thank you very much.